Here's a scary story about a haunted mirror from our Urban Legends series. Dust motes danced in a single beam of light, piercing the attic's gloom, illuminating forgotten relics of a bygone era. John, seeking old family photo albums, pushed aside a stack of yellowed newspapers. Behind them, draped in a stained linen sheet, stood something large and upright. Curiosity piqued. He pulled the covering away. It was a mirror, its ornate silver frame tarnished with age, the glass clouded with a thick layer of grime. He wiped a patch clean with his sleeve, revealing a surprisingly clear surface beneath. The attic, with its shadowy corners and stacked boxers, seemed to stretch into an infinite, darker space within the reflection. An unexplainable chill slithered down his spine, but he dismissed it as a draft from the old window. He leaned closer, intrigued by the craftsmanship of the frame, noticing strange, almost runic carvings etched into the silver. As he stared into his own reflection, an unsettling feeling began to creep over him. His image, usually so familiar, seemed subtly wrong. The eyes looking back at him were colder, the set of his jaw harder. He watched, frozen, as the corners of his reflection's mouth slowly, unnaturally, curled upwards into a wide, predatory smile. It wasn't his smile. It was a grotesque parody, full of malice. John's heart hammered against his ribs. He tried to look away, to break the horrifying gaze, but his body wouldn't respond. The figure in the mirror was no longer just a reflection. It was a separate entity, mocking him from its glass prison with a silent, chilling glee that promised untold horrors. The air grew heavy and cold, and the silence of the attic was broken only by his own ragged breathing. Panic finally seized him as the reflection's hand began to move. It lifted slowly, pressing against the inner surface of the glass, the fingertips flattening as if pushing against an invisible barrier. Then, with a sickening, ripple-like distortion, the fingers began to emerge from the mirror. They were pale and long, extending into the dusty air of the attic. The figure's eyes, once just a darker shade of his own, now flared with a malevolent, burning red light, an infernal glow that seemed to suck all the warmth from the room. John stumbled backward. A strangled cry caught in his throat. The hand was real, tangible, and reaching for him from a world that should not exist. The barrier between reality and the nightmare within the mirror was dissolving before his very eyes. He scrambled away, but it was too late. The spectral hand shot out and clamped onto his wrist with an icy, impossibly strong grip. He was anchored to the spot, a puppet on a string held by a demonic puppeteer. The reflection pulled, its sinister grin widening. A spiderweb of cracks erupted across the mirror's surface, spreading from where the hand had emerged. Yet the glass did not shatter. Instead, it seemed to become fluid, a shimmering portal. John screamed as he was dragged forward, his feet scraping uselessly against the wooden floorboards. The last thing he saw was the triumphant, glowing red eyes of his own face as the cold, dark surface of the mirror enveloped him, pulling him into its silent, waiting abyss. If you ever find an old mirror in a forgotten place, perhaps it's best to leave it covered. You never know who or what might be looking back. In the suffocating dark of a forgotten American city, a malevolent presence stirs. It begins as a whisper carried on the desolate wind, a flicker of movement where there should be none. Invisible eyes trace your every step, a cold dread crawling up your spine. The empty streets, once arteries of a bustling coal town, now only echo with the ghosts of sirens. This is a graveyard of dreams, where the memory of laughter has curdled into a perpetual lament. You hear footsteps on the cracked asphalt behind you, Riel. Too close. Your heart hammers against your ribs, as cold sweat beads on your brow. Every corner you turn seems to lead into a deeper abyss. The houses, with their shattered window pane, are tombs holding dark secrets of vanished families, and blood-splattered walls. Local legends whisper of vengeful minor spirits, buried alive, now clawing their way back to drag living souls down with them. Suddenly, a figure materializes from the gloom. It possesses empty, soulless eyes, skin torn and peeling, and claws that drip with fresh blood. A smile twists its lips, a horrifying sight that freezes your very soul. This thing is a creature from hell, its existence fueled by the town's history of violence. The air grows thick with the stench of decay. Your legs feel like lead as you navigate a maze of locked doors and cars clawed open by an unseen fury. The screams of past victims echo in your mind, a chorus of pleas for a mercy that never came. The creature closes in, its rotting breath hot on your neck. Flashes of forgotten horrors assault you. Brutal massacres in roadside motels. Mutilated bodies discovered in the surrounding forest. You remember the tales of government experiments, of tainted water that twisted a generation of townsfolk into these ravenous monsters. You turn a corner and see a house scarred with deep gouges, shadows dancing manically in its windows. You stumble inside, into a world of dust, dried blood, and family photos distorted by hate. A whisper slithers into your ear. You're next. Objects begin to move on their own. In a dusty mirror, the hollow eyes of a dead child stare back at you. The floorboards creak, and a sound draws you to the basement. Descending into the darkness, you are met by the gleaming eyes of deformed creatures, the true results of the labs. They crawl toward you, scaly and starved, their mouths filled with jagged teeth. Your scream is muffled by their cackling laughter as claws sink into your flesh. You fight, but you are dragged toward piles of gnawed bones. You break free, escaping into the twisted forest, where gnarled trees scratch at you like skeletal fingers. Mutant wolves, with glowing red eyes, howl in the distance. Pursued relentlessly, you trip and fall into a clearing, dominated by a blood-stained altar, covered in pagan symbols. Visions overwhelm you. Satanic rituals, innocent lives sacrificed to an ancient evil. Now, you are the offering. The creature looms over you, its eyes burning like embers as it begins to tear you apart. There is no rescue here. This is the true American horror story. Born in ghost towns that fester with serial killers, insane cults, and man-made plagues. Keep the lights on if you can, but in the end, the darkness always wins. The sun may rise tomorrow, but you will have vanished into the shadows, your soul trapped forever in this dreadful place. Even deeper you sink, where ghosts call out, telling their own tales of madness, possession, and monsters born of radiation. The ground opens up, revealing shallow graves filled with stopped watches and bloody rings. The creature catches you. Its teeth sink into your neck, and your world turns red. Your screams join the chorus of the damned. As the horror spreads beyond death itself, you can close your eyes, but the nightmare is waiting. Think this is just a story. Go ahead, look behind you. Terror is real, and it's always waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Good night, or what's left of it. The silence that follows is your doom. Under a sky the color of old slate, the abandoned house stood as a monument to decay, its form nearly swallowed by a tangle of aggressive ivy and skeletal trees. Sarah, a seasoned urban explorer, felt a familiar mix of caution and exhilaration as she approached. Her flashlight sliced through the oppressive gloom, its beam landing on a gate so rusted it looked like it was bleeding into the overgrown path. With a groan of tortured metal, the gate yielded, and the heavy front door creaked open, revealing a maw of darkness within. It was an invitation she couldn't refuse. Inside, the air was thick and still, heavy with the scent of dust and damp decay. Each step Sarah took was a careful negotiation with the groaning floorboards, the sound echoing in the profound silence. Dust motes, ancient and undisturbed, performed a swirling ballet in the cone of her flashlight. The house seemed to breathe around her, a low whisper in the wind that rattled through shattered window panes. In one room, a forgotten rocking horse sat motionless, its painted eyes seeming to follow her. In another, an old family portrait hung askew, the faces of its subjects violently scratched away. The sense of being watched was palpable, a cold pressure on the back of her neck. Then she heard indistinct footsteps from the floor above. She froze, her own breathing suddenly loud in her ears. But when she looked up, there was nothing but shadows and cobwebs. Drawn by an unseen force, Sarah ascended the creaking staircase and entered a small, dark study. Her light swept across the room and landed on a tattered journal resting on a desk, its leather cover cracked with age. As her fingers brushed the fragile pages, and she began to read the frantic, looping script. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, twisting into unnatural shapes on the walls. They pulsed and grew, seeming to writhe with a life of their own. A sudden, cold whisper materialized directly behind her, a single, unintelligible word that felt more like an intrusion into her mind than a sound. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs, just in time to see a blurred, spectral figure flicker in the doorway for a horrifying instant before vanishing completely. A choked cry escaped Sarah's lips as she stumbled backward, the flashlight slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor. Absolute darkness crashed down around her, suffocating and complete. Panic took over. She scrambled on her hands and knees, then lurched to her feet, running blindly through the disorienting labyrinth of rooms. She burst through the front door, collapsing onto the overgrown lawn and gasping for the clean, cold air. Her eyes fixed on the malevolent structure she had just escaped. The house stood silent and dark, just as she had found it, but for a single, faint light that flickered to life in an upper window, watching. The flickering monitor cast a pale, dancing light across Michael's face as he scrolled through dusty corners of the internet, a graveyard of forgotten forums and dead links. His apartment was quiet, save for the hum of his computer and the occasional scoff he let out. Superstitious nonsense, he muttered, clicking on a thread about ancient summoning rituals. Yet, amidst the pixelated text and low-res images, one symbol snagged his attention, an intricate, unsettling design that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. A cynical curiosity took hold. He grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper, his hand moving almost unconsciously as he began to trace the lines, mimicking the crude instructions on the screen. As the final line of the symbol was drawn, the air in the room grew instantly, unnaturally cold. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered violently before dimming to a weak, orange glow. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the apartment, seeming to vibrate from within the very walls. On his desk, pens and books started to tremble, sliding slowly towards the edge. His phone buzzed, a frantic, angry vibration, its screen a mess of corrupted text and glitching static. Michael tried to laugh it off a power surge, a weird prank bud. A knot of primal fear tightened in his gut, a faint, acrid smell like burnt matches and sulfur stung his nostrils. Then came the whispers, faint at first, a sibilant hiss in a language he couldn't comprehend. The whispers grew, weaving together into a discordant chorus that surrounded him, echoing from every direction at once. The deep growl intensified, becoming a tangible pressure against his ear. He glanced towards the darkest corner of his room, and his breath caught in his throat. 2 points of burning red light had appeared. Floating in the oppressive darkness, a silhouette began to coalesce around them, a hulking, horned shape that warped the air like a heat haze. Michael scrambled backward, his chair tipping over with a loud clatter as he fell to the floor, his mind screaming. The entity took a slow, deliberate step forward, its form solidifying, revealing a wicked, impossibly wide grin. Panic seized him. His eyes darted to the paper on the desk. Desperation gave him strength as he lunged for it, his fingers tearing frantically at the drawing. As the paper ripped, the entity recoiled with a piercing, otherworldly shriek that rattled the windows. Michael didn't stop, tearing the symbol into shreds until it was nothing but confetti. With a final, agonizing howl, the figure dissolved into wisps of shadow and vanished. The room was suddenly silent and still, the light returning to its normal state, but the cloying scent of sulfur lingered heavily in the air. Michael was left on the floor, shaking and hyperventilating, his gaze fixed on the scattered pieces of torn paper. As he pushed himself up, his sleeve slid back, revealing a faint red mark freshly seared into his wrist, the very symbol he had just destroyed.